ahead and get into the show with our guest. Our guest today is guild member, excellent guild member, been around for a very, very long time, Dustyn Coontz. Dustyn, as he said, he's a criminal defense lawyer in Lansing, Michigan. He is I love his bio, husband to Stephanie, dad to Lily, a human, and Archie, a dog, and a optimistic fan of the Detroit Lions. And we'll get to into the rest of his bio later on. Dustyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's good to be back, you guys.
Dustyn, you know, you've been such a great member of the Guild and of just Maximum Lawyer in general, but why don't you go ahead and start by telling everybody sort of your experience after law school, sort of why you went to law school, and then what happened after law school up until the point that you opened your firm.
Sure. So towards the end of law school, I thought I was going to be in the Air Force JAG Corps, and then just some old medical stuff from when I was in middle school came up, ended up making it so that I couldn't be in the Air Force. And then I was kind of left struggling to find a job while studying for the bar. Took the first offer I received, which was as a law clerk to a probate judge. Made an obscenely low amount of money doing that for a little over a year, but by far the greatest boss I've ever worked for was that judge. She put me in contact with a pretty well-known criminal defense attorney in Flint, Michigan, that she was good friends with, because she knew that's what I wanted to do. Worked there for not about exactly a year and a half, 18 months to the day, before I opened the doors to Coontz Law.
So what's the journey been like for you? Has it been easy? Has it been hard? Tell us about what it's been like growing the firm to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, not to be trite about it, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? It's not easy, but it's been incredibly fulfilling for me. Going on 4 years almost since I've opened the doors to Coontz Law, and criminal defense is it's hard. It's a tough business. You're dealing with people who are statistically, I've learned from my therapist, statistically disproportionately high percentage of sociopaths, people who, you know, I do believe in my clients, right? Like I believe in their humanity, and that most of the time, you know, people are people and people make bad choices, and sometimes those bad choices are criminal. But it's hard to collect. It's hard to charge a reasonable fee, you know, to get paid what you're worth in the first place, and actually have people be able to afford that. So yeah, it's been tough, but worth it.
Dustyn, what surprised you the most when you started your firm? What were on the business side of things? What were the adjustments you had to make, or the changes in thinking?
I think so. One thing I heard from my boss in the job before was, you're taking too long on whatever thing I was working on. I remember in particular, there was one brief I was working on, and I'd been working on it for like a week pretty intensively. And he was just like, we need to get this thing filed. I don't know what you're doing. You know, how is this taking you that long? And it was taking me that long because I was doing law school research and law school briefing, and you just got to move cases. I mean, you have to do a good job, but there's a point at which you just need to get the thing filed. And that became all the more real to me when all of a sudden I wasn't getting a paycheck, and I had to have the capacity to take on new business. I had to move my cases along.
I don't know if you're wanting to get into this or not, but I know that it's in your bio, so I wanted to bring it up.
Mhm.
You put in here, Dustyn is a lifelong. I'm sorry, Dustyn is on a lifelong quest to maximize the gifts of his ADHD. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that's affected you?
Yeah, 100%. I think last time I was on here was the first pandemic summer, right? Like June or July or something of 2020. And shortly after that is when I received my ADHD diagnosis, and that was such a turning point for my entire life. It was something that hadn't even occurred to me until I heard Marshall Lichty on the Lawyerist podcast several months before that, and of course and as he was reading I guess some of the symptoms, especially as to high performing people with ADHD, it's just like every box, like, oh yeah, that checks out, that checks out, that checks out. I'm like, and I remember coming into my house and telling my wife, hey, I think I have ADHD. And she's like, what are you talking about? And then that was the reaction I got from family members when I told them I was formally diagnosed with ADHD. You were great in school. What are you talking about? Because everyone thinks like it's like the kid who's doing cartwheels in the back of the classroom. That's the ADHD kid. They're also kind of the daydreamers, right? And when you're high performing, that can also mask a lot of the things. But anyway, I think it was August 6th of 2020, I received the diagnosis, and it really flipped a switch. It helped me put a label on the things, both that I was really good at and the things that I was really, really bad at. And by, I think, just being able to name it, it made it easier for me to make the adjustments to maximize the gifts and mitigate the weaknesses.
And so how did that change the way you practice or the way that you ran your firm?
Yeah, so I think, well, okay, at that point, my firm was me, one kind of just jack of all trades assistant, and even that was kind of a new thing for me. And then I was using some answering service or another at the time. I went through a few of them. When I got the diagnosis, what I realized, okay, I need to narrow the range of things I'm focusing on in order to grow this firm the right way. Because if I'm spread too thin, I'm not going to be able to focus on any of it. But if I can turn on my hyper focus for just a few things, then we can really start cooking. So it motivated me to hire an attorney for the first time. And then from there, just seeing where there were more gaps in the firm and hiring people to kind of fill the gaps. And it's stuff that I hear all the time, for instance, on the Maximum Lawyer podcast, or all, business books and podcasts that I read and listen to. But just being able to figure out why that was so important for me, right? Not just in general, but me, that was, it was a huge turning point for me.
So Dustyn, how did you communicate that to your family members, and how do you communicate that to your team members? So you bring someone on new, do you let them know? Do you let them find out? How do you deal with that?
So my mom will tell you that she found out with the rest of the world when I posted to Facebook, and so that's how I communicated to my family, I guess. She was pretty pissed about that, but I'm saying, I don't know, you raised me, you ought to know this. So I don't know, with family, it's not really not much has changed, although my mom and my wife at least understand a little bit better why I don't return their texts right away, or within a couple days. As far as team members, yeah, I'm very upfront about it. I tell them that because I want them to understand where my gaps are and why they're coming on, and what their role is within the firm and how that relates to me. Yeah.
Wait on Jim to.
Sorry, my mic
You're good.
or my laptop's about to die, and let's see. Some of these plugs don't work in this house. That's really weird.
People get to see the sausage being made. I like it.
I just have to go shoot this in the kitchen. Hold on.
This part stays, right?
Yeah, this is this is great television. There we go.
Hey, pretty sconces. I like the sconces in the kitchen. That's pretty nice.
Funny. I'm gonna ask this question, then I'm probably gonna move around some more. Dustyn, I'm sure that coming up with that realization and that assessment of yourself was very freeing. And you mentioned in your bio that this is now a lifelong quest. What lessons do you have for people who think they have ADHD or do have ADHD when it comes to running a law firm?
Yeah, well, if you think you do and you haven't been diagnosed, I mean, I really highly recommend making an appointment with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I went with a psychiatrist because in the event that I did have ADHD, and medication would be helpful, then it could be prescribed. And that's exactly how it happened. And I will tell you that Adderall rules. So definitely make that appointment. And then I guess as far as running a practice with ADHD, you can't do it alone. You can't do it very well alone. You need people to complement you and more than just complement you, liberate you to do the things that you're really good at, the things that you are equipped for. And again, we talk about that kind of stuff all the time in terms of leverage and time management, but I think it's even more critically important when you have ADHD.
So tell us more about your firm. What are your plans for the future for your firm? Are you planning on scaling it? What do you want to do with your firm?
Yeah, I have a pretty clear and bold vision for what I want. I think summer of 2019, I created this 10-year vision. And what I came up with is 10 years, 10 area codes, 10 offices. And so Michigan, the Lower Peninsula has 10, well, it has 11 area codes, but 2 of them are like in the same geographic area. And the thing about criminal defense that makes it so tough to scale is it's so court intensive. And what I learned is and you can only eat up so much of, I guess, you can only take up so much of the pie in a particular region. And if you're driving 3 hours to court, then you're not getting anything done. I mean, you can't scale like that. So kind of what I envision is having a hub office in Lansing, where we are now, and then these little spokes in all of the other area codes by the end of 2029. And then kind of each little spoke has an attorney, an assistant, client care coordinator, and still evolving as far as the exact details go, but I'm I'm hoping we have office number 2 launched by the end of this year.
We're talking today to Dustyn Coontz on the Maximum Lawyer podcast. Dustyn is a criminal defense lawyer in the great state of Michigan, and we're really happy to have him on. Dustyn, I know that a lot of our members, particularly those that do have jobs that involve a lot of court time, were sort of hit hard by the pandemic. Do you want to talk about, we talked about how you sort of worked with your ADHD. You want to talk about how you worked through the pandemic?
It's hard to say it tactfully, but there were a lot of things I enjoyed about the pandemic. Now, of course, if I could trade the millions of people who died to not have the good things that came my way, of course I would rather have not gone through it. But because for a long time, all of my court hearings were virtual. I didn't even have to put on a full suit. I just stayed at my desk in my basement, and stuff that used to take 3 hours when you factor in travel time, sitting around and waiting for your case to get called on the docket, time just kind of shooting the shit with the client. All of a sudden that takes the 15 minutes that the hearing actually takes. And meanwhile, I can be doing work. It was great. Really allowed me to focus on documenting some systems and I guess laying the groundwork to start expanding.
I kind of want to go back for a second, because whenever you just said that made me think of something. Can you tell a difference? Because you mentioned Adderall, but can you tell a difference in your ability to document and create systems from like pre-ADHD diagnosis and post-ADHD diagnosis? I know I'm going backwards, but I am really curious to see if you can notice that difference.
Speaking of ADHD and bouncing from topic to topic.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's quite all right. That's we're in my comfort zone, my sweet spot. So is it easier? I think so. I think it is. I think I'm just more attentive to little details, I guess. So the systems that I was creating back in the early days of the pandemic, it was I would do I'd get like a solid 95% of the way there, but like the 5% I left out was pretty critical. And so I think just being able to spot those like small gaps in these things I create, that's definitely improved.
So we were talking about the launching of your next office. What is that looking like? How is that coming together? What are you enjoying working on that? What's sort of giving you a headache?
Well, I think it's not going to come as quickly as I'd originally wanted, and actually the reason is I think because of a lot of those shortcomings in the systems I built, the little details that I overlooked, and we've grown quite a bit since I originally built those systems. So right now it's actually kind of like a secret within the firm. Only a few select people know that we're doing this and are working on this behind the scenes, but we're kind of burning everything to the ground and rebuilding the way we work and how we manage our cases. And I need to get that right, and I need to have somebody who's a better operator than I am, I think. So the COO, type person who can complement my skill set, but also be in a senior leadership position. I think that's pretty necessary before we start trying to replicate what we're doing here in a different part of the state, because we've had some things fall through the cracks. Like we've had a couple recent driver's license appeals that didn't get timely filed, and they weren't things that I was personally working on. There were things other lawyers were working on. But Jim, I've heard you say a few times, everything bad that happens in your firm is your fault. And I 100% believe that. And it's my responsibility to set people up for success. And so it's like little gaps in, okay, we didn't have a checklist or like a filing deadline in there. So all that to say, I want to get our systems right before we and get the right people here before we start growing, even, I guess, scaling across the state, because yeah, that'll come with new opportunities, but it also comes, I think, with possibility for things to spiral out of control as, you know, as the problems, our shortcomings are also scaled. That makes sense.
So Dustyn, you say something in your pre-interview questionnaire that I want you to address. You say you have to do the hard work at making your life what you want it to be, and it starts with a brutally honest assessment of who you are. Will you address that?
Yeah, totally. So when we talk about building the firm of your dreams or the life of your dreams, you do have to have the end in mind, right? But you also have to have the start in mind. And it's not just, it's even more basic than like, okay, what's the first step I need to take? It's like it's who am I, right? Because that, I guess that's your mode of transportation, right? Is you. And so you need to know what your strengths are. You need to know what your weaknesses are. You have to be honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are. And the only way you do that is by figuring it out, right? It's by seeing a therapist. It's about thinking about these things, journaling about these things, talking to people that are close to you about them. And you know, for me, like we already talked about, the ADHD diagnosis was kind of that first step in brutal honesty, because it allowed me to say, like, I am biochemically wired in such a way that all of these like little paperwork things, like I am never going to do that, right? And it's in one sense you can stop blaming yourself for it, but in another, it's, you can also like give up like the false hope that you're gonna get some of those things figured out, and you just need to try harder. What you need to try harder on is figuring out who you are.
I think that's such a great point, Dustyn. I think so often whenever I'm talking to law firm owners, I'm always struck by how much of a influence their personality has on their firms. And so, you know, if they're like, for me, I'm sort of compulsive, right? So like I have this sort of almost compulsivity about wanting to sign up as many cases as possible, almost like in a maniacal way sometimes. So it's really something. And I think you're right that you don't need to just fix your weaknesses. You need to, and I think it's not even all that helpful to call them weaknesses. I think we just have, you know, our strengths, and then, like you said, there's just some things that we're not built for or built to do. And I think that just naming that in and of itself is a huge step in the right direction.
All right. Well, we are at time, so I do want to wrap things up. Before I do, I want to remind everyone to join other people like Dustyn in the big Facebook group. There's a lot of great activity going on there on a daily basis. If you want a more high-level conversation with people like Dustyn, join us in the guild. Go to maxlawguild.com. Get your tickets to the conference. There's only a few months left, so maxlawcon2022.com. Make sure you get your tickets there. And if while you're listening to the rest of this episode, if you don't mind, give us a 5-star review. We'll greatly appreciate it. Jimmy, what's your hack of the week?
So when people get their green cards, I always tell them that they have to operate on 2 tracks. One is make sure that you don't lose your green card, and the other track is set yourself up for citizenship. I think when it comes to owning a law firm, we have to operate on 2 tracks. And what I mean by that is that if you are creating a system or if you're fixing something, don't just fix it once. So you have to live in the present and the future. Fix it now, but also fix your systems. And I think it's so easy to just focus on fixing the problem, then going on to the next problem, instead of saying, hey, how can I take what I'm doing this one time and make it so that it either doesn't happen again, or that we have a written out policy and procedure on how to fix this one thing. If you do that on the micro level in the moment, it's probably going to be better than affirmatively sitting down and saying, we're going to fix everything at once, because that can be overwhelming. But if you operate on that 2-track system, then you can just fix things as they come. And eventually you'll have covered most things. You'll never have covered everything, but it's to me, a much more organic way of doing this.
Very good. I like it. I like good advice. Dustyn, you know the routine. Do you have a tip or a hack for us?
I do. I actually made a list of several just to be
Nice.
ready. Yeah, but I'm only going to talk about one. So it's this thing called Spark Type, or Sparketype, SPARKETYPE. It's yet another personality test type of thing, but it's different because I don't know, measures, I guess, or helps you figure out is how you work. And so there are like these 10 different types that you can fall into. And we've all done it within my firm. And I think it's been really helpful in helping me figure out how to manage how people are working and the types of things they're working on. And so for me, well, for everyone, you get a primary, a secondary, and then an anti-spark type. So your primary and secondary are the things, when you're doing these things, you're really set on fire, you're in your zone. And when you're doing your anti, it can be pretty draining. And so like for me, my primary was scientist and my secondary was advocate, and my anti was performer. So like with the first two, you know, I'm at my best if I'm like in my lab, in my office, just for hours, uninterrupted, you know, zoning in on one thing. And if I'm advocating about something I believe in or a client I believe in, like that's when I'm at my absolute best. When I have to go through bullshit and, you know, perform, then it's very draining for me. And so just kind of figuring out, again, just being able to name the things you probably already innately know about yourself. It's really helpful to then figure out what you need to do your best work and live your best life.
I love that. That's really good. I think there's a lot of great nuggets inside of this episode, and I think that's one of them. So I'm torn about what my tip to be for the week, but I think I'm gonna give a couple. One of them is just more of a challenge, not necessarily a tip. So Christopher Nicolason and Paul Yokobitis have both completed 75 Hard. It's a program created by Andy Frisella. It's an app. There's a book associated with it. There's a podcast. Andy Frisella is one of those guys. He's an acquired taste. So I will start with that. But there's a challenge where you go 75 days straight of doing 2 workouts a day. One of them has to be outside. You have to take a progress pic. You have to read 10 pages. You can't listen to it. Yeah, drink a gallon of water. You got to follow a specific diet that you choose, and then you can't have any cheat meals or alcohol. I am not going to start that yet. I'm going to start it after the conference because I want to have some bourbon with people. But I'm going to start. But I just want to put that on people's horizons. So that's not my tip of the week. My tip is actually this. I've been thinking more and more about hiring a lot lately. We just posted 3 new job ads, so we're constantly hiring. I know a lot of people are, but for people that have never hired before, it can be really, really challenging, and you hesitate. So my tip is to just job ad up. Just do nothing else. You don't have to hire anybody. But my tip is to I want you to at least start the process and start to think it through a little bit and get a job ad up. Just get it up. Find someone else's sample, whatever it is, just get it on Indeed. It's free to post it. Don't do the paid listing, just do a free one and just get that ball rolling. Because once you start to exercise those muscles, you'll start to actually do things. So that is my tip of the week. Dustyn, thank you so much. And thanks for coming on and being vulnerable. Really, really appreciate it. It's not the easiest thing for some people to talk about. So really appreciate it. And hopefully people get a lot of good advice out of this.
I hope so. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks, Dustyn. Appreciate it, man.